It is Friday, June 24th, and you were listening to another edition of the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. My name is Blair Angulo. I am joined by the Director of Recruiting for 24/7 Sports, Steve Wiltfong, and we're here to discuss the commitment of five-star quarterback Arch Manning, who has finally come off the board, the number one prospect in the 2023 class. He has made a decision. He is headed to Austin. Steve, how are we doing? How are we dealing with the fallout of Arch Manning coming off the board to the Longhorns?
Well, it's exciting recruiting news today. One of the more scrutinized, if not the most scrutinized recruitment in high school football history, college football history is over. Arch Manning picks Texas over Alabama and Georgia and a slew of others. He also entertained Florida and LSU at times, but Texas was one that was in there from the very beginning. And from the very first Zoom that Steve Sarkisian and his staff had with Arch Manning, they hit it off, and the relationship just blossomed from there all the way to this point, which included 4 visits to Austin, 4 visits to his other 2 finalists. This was not any kind of a rash decision here made by Arch Manning. He and his family, he checked a lot of boxes throughout his process and made his decision. And now people can go back to scrutinizing his game now and not his college decision, because that's done.
Yeah, he was very deliberate, very methodical. You had broken that down for us a number of times here on this podcast, how he was trying to weigh all the options. He was trying to make sure he was making not only the best decision for himself, but for his future. What style of play would fit him best? The quarterback's coach, just the stylistic fit in terms of the city and the program and the team. At the end of the finish line, when we are past that now and we look through what his commitment means for Texas, what made the Longhorns the team that Arch ultimately picked? Were there certain factors that gave Steve Sarkisian the edge?
Well, I think with all 3 of his finalists, I think he felt very comfortable with all 3 schools. And I think he was looking for a place that he thinks is going to develop him to be the best player he can be. And I think with Coach Sarkisian and his track record with developing quarterbacks and developing offenses, that excited him. I think that a cool college town and a cool college atmosphere was also important to him. And Athens and Austin were 2 places that were routinely brought up and mentioned in that same breath. So I think that he really fell in love with Austin and that scene and that environment there, where he can just go and have a tremendous college experience. And I think, just the trajectory of the program under the staff is exciting. And there's a lot to, when you look at Texas football and forecast what they could be in the future. I like the way that they're recruiting and winning in the transfer portal. So we'll see how it comes together on Saturdays.
Yeah, although this process was deliberate and it did take a while, it could have gone further, right? Like, we just kicked off the summer this week. There's another 4-week recruiting dead period on the horizon. The last weekend of official visits in the month of June is coming up. So the timing of it is pretty interesting in Texas's side of things, right? Like, this gives them a lot of momentum heading into this final weekend, heading into the dead period where they can start pitching their program a certain different way than maybe, say, if Arch Manning had prolonged this decision and this whole process had dragged on into the month of August or even into the season.
Well, yeah, they'll certainly, certainly you'll have a domino effect, and Arch Manning will be one of the better peer recruiters in the country, I would think, and his commitment will resonate with other blue chippers that are considering Texas. And there was never a timetable for his decision, Blair. And talking to Arch and his dad and his coach throughout the process, they indicated that they weren't going to be held ransom by a decision before senior season, or held hostage. If they needed to go into the fall and if Arch needed to take some more visits in the fall and watch how teams played and that nature, that they were going to do that also. But I think this latest round of official visits, where he got a chance to go to Georgia, Alabama, and Texas 3 weekends in a row and compare and contrast and decide what he wanted, the timing was right to make his decision. He's got the Manning Passing Academy going on this weekend. And, they did a little bit of 7-on-7 on the field at Isidore Newman yesterday. And you had Eli Manning in the press box. You had Peyton Manning on the sideline. Obviously, Arch's parents are there. And Nelson Stewart, the head coach, told me there was a family summit. And so I think that, everybody talked, and they certainly had a lot of research and a lot of conversations with college coaches, and talking to AJ Milwee and Steve Sarkisian, talking to Buster Faulkner and Todd Monken and Kirby Smart and Bill O'Brien and Pete Golding and those guys at Alabama. It came up burnt orange, and Arch Manning's headed to Texas, where he's going to play his college football.
You mentioned it earlier. We're done dissecting his recruitment. Let's dissect him as a prospect. You were down in New Orleans earlier this week at that 7-on-7 event. What did you think of Arch Manning? You've seen a lot of quarterbacks throughout this recruiting cycle. Does he still stack up for you as the number one player in the country?
Well, I've watched a lot of Arch Manning play football on Friday nights over the last 2 seasons, and he's got everything you're looking for in the top quarterback recruit in the country. I mean, first of all, he's going to be physically ready to walk into Texas's quarterback room and compete in that regard. He's 6'4", 220 pounds. So his physical prowess impresses. He's got terrific arm talent. There's not a throw on the field he can't make. He can beat you to all 3 levels. He can beat you outside the hashes. And his anticipation and his accuracy and his ability to see the field. He's a good decision maker with the football. I think the other thing that, talking to college coaches and then certainly his high school coach that people love about him is just obviously his high football IQ, what he's able to do on the board, how he's able to see and process the game. And we so much talk about the physical tools and traits that quarterbacks have, but that position is so mental, and how you can dictate the game pre-snap and get into the right protection and get into the right play call and know where to go with the football and knowing how to attack defenses. I think that college coaches are incredibly impressed with the conversations that they had with Arch Manning and his acumen for the game. And then he's got
I think you'll be hard pressed, right, to find a quarterback in this 2023 group that will be as mentally prepared as Arch Manning is.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you add the intangibles. Great leader, teammates like him. I've been to practices over there, and just the way his guys respond to him and the way he responds to his teammates. It's again, he's not number one because his last name's Manning. Now, certainly, with his last name being Manning, he comes from good genetics, and that helps. His whole entire family is athletic, and not just on his dad's side, but his mom was a pretty good athlete herself. So he comes from good genetics. The apple obviously didn't fall far from the tree here, and Texas landed a quarterback that has all the ability and all the potential to come in there and play that position at the caliber they're hoping for.
Yeah, Steve Sarkisian has done this in the past. He was obviously a catalyst in Alabama, landing Bryce Young a few cycles ago. He was able to pick up Quinn Ewers, another former number 1 overall prospect in his respective class, who transferred from Ohio State after his true freshman season. You can talk about what he was able to do in the NFL and even dating back to his days at USC, recruiting the position. Now that this quarterback room at Texas looks a lot spicier when you project things or when you forecast things. How does Arch Manning stack up with Quinn Ewers? I mean, that battle could be one of the most anticipated quarterback battles that we've seen in a long time.
Well, I think that Arch Manning is coming to Texas to be the best player that Arch Manning can be on his own timeline, right? I mean, Quinn Ewers, we're expecting to probably win the job this year. And with that, he'll be a returning starter next year. And we're anticipating Quinn having great success. He was our number 1 player in the country. Quinn Ewers had a sophomore season that was epic at South Lake Carroll, playing for one of the best high school football programs in the country, playing against some of the best high school competition in America. He threw for over 4,000 yards, 45 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions. I think that certainly the best players are going to play, right? But the way I see it is that Quinn Ewers is going to be NFL draft eligible, not this coming season, but after the one after that. And if he plays at the level that we think he can, you have Arch Manning getting 1 year in the hopper and then competing for the job in year 2. That's the way I see it lining up. Now, they have to play it out. They have to go out and execute. Quinn's got to play well. Texas is still rebuilding its offensive line. They recruited the best offensive line in the country last year, but those guys are teenagers right now. That's a nice line of guardians that's going to be out there by the time Arch Manning's ready to go. We'll see what that protection looks like for Quinn Ewers this year, or whoever's back there, whether it's Hudson Card or whoever. But I'm not viewing it as Quinn Ewers versus Arch Manning right now. I expect Quinn Ewers to be fantastic and do his thing. And then when his thing's up, here comes Arch Manning ready to jump in and do his thing. That's what happens at great programs that are competing for national championships. That's the expectation and the standard at Texas. You look at Alabama, you went from Tua to Mac to Bryce. At Texas, you're going to want to go from Quinn to Arch to the next guy that we're not even talking about right now. Maybe it's your guy out there in California. I know Texas is in the middle of it for him, and
Julian Saying.
They can, maybe it goes from Quinn to Arch to Julian, and so we'll see what happens. But so far, so good with this quarterback room since Coach Sarkisian and AJ Milwee and company have started getting their guys in there.
Yeah, let's dissect some of those dominoes, particularly with Georgia and Alabama, the two programs that were in pursuit and were there jostling at the end for Arch Manning. Where does Georgia turn? Could they now throw their hat into the Dante Moore sweepstakes? And does Alabama, which already has Eli Holstein committed in the 2023 class, do they still continue to pursue a second quarterback in this class?
Well, we can start with Alabama because they're also in the mix for Dylan Lonergan, a top 247 passer from Georgia that is going to play football and baseball in college. And there's been a lot of smoke around South Carolina and Stanford in that recruitment, but Alabama should definitely not be discounted. He's visited several times and has hit it off with their baseball program just as much as their football program. And for Georgia, it gets a little interesting because they offered Chris Vezina a scholarship, and he committed to Clemson. They were in it early for Nico. They do have an offer out for Dante Moore, so maybe they do try and rejuvenate some things there. Dante Moore, I like where Oregon stands with Dante Moore right now. You got LSU in there. He's fresh off a visit to Texas A&M. Or maybe they go out and try and get the spatula out and flip somebody. I mean, you see Ohio State recruiting Austin Novosad, who's committed to Baylor. Brock Glenn's kind of been a hot name out there. As he considers the Auburn, Ohio State, Florida State, Mississippi State, and others in that one, So, I mean, Georgia, their program that won the national championship last year, they run a pro-style offense. And so there's someone that can come in late on somebody and have a lot to offer. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and then you look at the 2024 class, I feel like with the prospects in that group, they can now look at Georgia knowing that Arch Manning won't be there, and that becomes maybe a stronger destination for some of those prospects, and maybe a more attractive option, considering that they could be kind of a headliner in a class. Steve, before we go, final weekend of the month before a 4-week dead period in the month of July. What are you going to be looking for this weekend?
Oh, man, so many programs hosting big visitors this weekend. The recruitment that I'm kind of very intrigued to see how it plays out, and he takes his last visit is Caleb Downs, the number one safety in the country. He's at Ohio State this weekend. He's coming off visits to Georgia, Alabama, and Notre Dame. So that's a tightly contested one that's going to end this summer. Caden Proctor, the number one offensive tackle in the top 247. He's taken his official visit to Iowa. Iowa and Alabama are his finalists. He was at Alabama earlier this month. And then you have Francis Mauigoa, who's taking his 5th official visit to Tennessee after going to Alabama, Florida, Miami, and USC. So those are 3 top 10 players that have positioned themselves here to make summer decisions. And so those are official visits that I'm watching closely. And then certainly we'll see what happens with like Dante Moore this weekend and prospects like that.
Another big weekend of recruiting visits as we wrap up the month of June. Remember, stay locked into 24/7 Sports for all the latest buzz and recruiting info on your favorite college football team. For Steve Wiltfong and our producer, Lance Glynn, I am Blair Angulo. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast.